So hello everyone, thanks for joining us today for Introduction to 3D Printing and Design. My name is Gabby, like Sarah said, and I have about 2 years of experience with 3D printing and design now. I don't think we went over the objectives for tonight. Did we miss that slide?
I did. Do you want to just go over it verbally? I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. Hopefully, students who haven't had any experience with 3D printing or design at the end of this class should be able to modify simple shapes using Tinkercad.com. I'll explain what that is a little bit later on. Understand how 3D printers work, as well as the limitations of 3D printing. Those are our 3 main goals for tonight. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get started. So 3D printing, in case some of you guys don't know, is the process where a 3D design is turned into a real object. First, software is used to slice the 3D design into layers, and then the design is printed layer by layer on a 3D printer. So there are several types of 3D printers. The most common is fused deposition modeling, abbreviated as FDM. FDM printers drop little melted material onto a bed, and the models are built layer by layer. So hopefully you can see right behind me here, I have one printer. This is what I'm referring to as the bed. And then there is material being melted and pushed through this extruder. That one you probably can't see. And then the extruder is dropping material one layer at a time. I'm not sure if you can see, but hopefully there are 3D printers right behind me. The build size, I'm sorry. And I don't know if you'll notice, but so some of them are bigger than others, and the build plate dictates just how big you can print something. So 3D printing is great if you want to make unique and customizable items or customized items. It's also best for rapid prototyping and not mass production. So you're not going to be able to print a lot of things just really quickly to sell, for example. We also use PLA, so this roll back here of the material that's melted onto the build plate is called PLA. PLA is a cornstarch-based plastic, and so it brittles over time and has a relatively low melting point. So you want to avoid having it too close to heat or using it for something that would generate a lot of heat. It also takes quite a while. This model here of our figurine called Groot from one of the Marvel movies. He is quite small. He's completely decorative, so he has no function, but it did take about 18 hours to print this, so it is incredibly slow. It's built one layer at a time. During this time, please feel free to ask me any questions about the 3D printers. Back to the sizes. You are limited, obviously, by the build by the size of the plate. You are able to build separate or print separate parts and combine them afterwards. But again, it's a pretty slow process. If you're looking to make something incredibly big, you will have to print it in parts and then assemble it afterwards. The printing overall is also limited by a few different factors. There's print speed, the diameter of the nozzle, as well as the layer thickness. And most of the printers here have different nozzles that you can install onto the printer, depending on what it is that you're looking to print. but there are obviously other factors too. So this is purely decorative. So you're not able to notice, but inside it's entirely hollow in order to speed up the printing process.
Hey, Gabby, we have a question.
Yes, the question, how do you create a design? So with that, we'll get into that in a little bit later. Right now, I just want to just sort of start out with the 3D printers that we have here available in the shop. So now we're going to move on to Tinkercad. What we're using to make these models is a website called Tinkercad.com. It's free, it's cloud-based, so it's always available online. And it's easy to learn compared to other 3D modeling platforms. It is free and easy to use, whereas there are plenty of other software or 3D modeling software out there that can be a lot harder to learn and usually have a pretty steep price. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now so we can get started on looking at Tinkercad.com.
So Gabby, we have a student asked that if it's to confirm if it's called filament.
Yes, the material that goes through the printer nozzle is called filament. There are also different types. The ones that we have here are PLA, like I mentioned earlier. There are quite a few others. So this PLA would not be food safe, for example. I know in the past we've had an activity where we made cookie cutters. And for those cookie cutters, we had to get specific, I believe it's ABS, or I can't remember the name of the type of filament it is, but that one is food safe and you are able to put it in the dishwasher. This we do not recommend to use for any sort of cooking. Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen now. This is the calendar event page. Here you can click on access course materials to get both to the course materials and just a general, shop page that we've created. Under the 3D printing and design tab, you will find this particular lesson for tonight, as well as the instructions that I'll be going into in just a bit for our first model that we're creating, as well as other, sort of designs you can follow through, or you can follow with us to get used to 3D modeling. So the first one, so this keychain instruction for tonight will open up to this. This is what I'll be using for tonight. Feel free to follow along. Or if you like, also please feel free to just watch. You are able to access these later and practice on your own on Tinkercad.com. So this is Tinkercad.com. You are able to access it online. Normally when we're here in class, we would log you into our account. That way we would be able to easily download the files that you've created and give you a print example of what you designed. In this case, it's not possible anymore, but you are able to access Tinkercad.com online and create a free account. Currently the age limit for accounts is 13. If you have anyone in your house that's younger, you just need an adult to approve the account. But you can also use a demo account. Again, it's free to use or free to create an account. You're welcome to try to do that tonight or just at any other time. So this is what our account dashboard looks like. I think you can see here on the screen the past few months that I've been teaching this class, as well as other designs that people have dropped off in order to have printed. But so when you're ready to start a new design, you want to go ahead and click on Create New Design. The first thing you're going to see here right in the middle is going to be the work plane. This work plane should sort of mimic the build plate that I showed you guys on the 3D printer earlier. Down at the bottom, you'll notice that the default measurement is in millimeters. You are able to change that to something that you're more comfortable with, like if you normally work in inches. And if you want to make that match sort of what your print bed is over here to make sure that you are not building outside of that print bed, it's useful. But for tonight's class, I'm going to go ahead and leave it in millimeters. Over on the left, you'll have just some navigational tools. When you click on the front part of the square, it'll get you to a front view of your build plate. The home will always bring you home. This will make a little bit more sense once I start playing with some of the objects, zooming in and out. And then most importantly, over on your right are some of the basic shapes. If you click down, there are a few others that you can select from. I think tonight we'll mostly be using some of the basic shapes here, the box, the cylinder, as well as the text and numbers. But there are quite a few others to work with. Let me go ahead and select just sort of a box, drop it into the work plane so you can get a better look at some of the navigational tools on the side here, on the left side. So when I click front, you'll see the front side of this cube. If you are working on the face of that block and you want to zoom in, this is sort of what it'll look like. And if you'll notice, so some of the top face of that is gone. So you would sort of use, again, the cube to be able to look on all sides of your model. And you are clicking and then just sort of dragging. This home button is really useful for when you want to just take a look back. Sometimes you get a little lost in the details. So those are some of the most basic and popular features you'll be using on Tinkercad. So for tonight's class and for an introduction to 3D modeling, we build simple shapes. In this case, it'll be a basic keychain. I also want to point out that back over on the shops page, the third link, the Tinkercad handout, has a lot of the hotkeys that you can use on Tinkercad. So some of the things that we were using, rotating 45-degree angle, that sort of thing. Make sure to use this as you're getting familiar with Tinkercad. A few more things I want to show you with this one basic shape before we get started on the modeling are the features, those little features that come up once I've selected the model. The white corners here are usually, to obviously resize your model. But if you'll notice, I clicked on this one square or this one corner and I dragged it off to the right. And so it made it longer. If you don't want to necessarily just drag one side and make your model disproportionate, one of the other most popular features, or one of the things you're going to use, is control. I believe it's control. One second. Is holding down, I'm sorry, your shift key. So in case I just wanted to make this bigger but proportionate, I would go ahead and click down on the shift key and then go ahead and click and drag that square. And if you'll notice, it grows proportionate. I think we have a question. Let's see. What does the scribble shape do? So it doesn't do anything necessarily, but I will show you sort of an example of that. It really just lays out that. So that is not what I wanted it to look like. Sorry, one second. So this is sort of what we were working on. When you go back to the something you work, it automatically saves as you're going along. But then in order to keep working on your project, they refer to it as tinker this. So this is what it looks like. You can zoom into it. This shape could be a little bit harder to create if you're just starting out. So it's sort of just a fun object that you can add to your design and manipulate. You can make it really long, but it doesn't actually say anything, and it's not very useful for now, especially not with our keychain. We'll be using the text feature so you can actually type in something that you can read. Another really important feature is the undo. It also shows when you hover over it, it shows you the hotkeys, which is Control-Z. Anytime you've made a mistake, undoing will be your best friend. So in this case, I deleted that scribble, and if I just wanted to come back, hold down Control-Z and it comes right back. And we can go back to some of these squares I was talking about. So obviously, if you click and drag, you will change the size. Another really important one is this cone here at the top. So this cone does not actually, if you go up and down, it does not make your model any taller or shorter. What it does instead is, let me give you a side view so you get a better look at it. When I click and drag on that triangle or that cone, what you're doing is moving your object within your plane. So what that did is not actually make it taller, but raise it from the print bed. So if you'll notice now, it's a few millimeters off of the build plate. You want to try to avoid doing this because once you've finished your model and you're getting ready to print it, it being up in the air will cause a lot of problems. It probably won't print properly or at all. So a good thing to make sure right before you're printing is to make sure that that is actually touching the build plate, so it's at the 0 amount. One last thing I forgot to mention, you can also obviously click and drag, but what I prefer to do and what another option that you have is instead to just sort of click on the number and input sort of the measurements that you want. So if I don't want this to be 17 millimeters in height, and instead I need it to be 20, I find it easier to go ahead and just type in the 20, click enter, and your design will adjust to that. A lot of these sort of features that I'm using right now, we'll go ahead and get started or go more into when we start designing our keychain. But I'm just giving you a little preview. Okay, so hopefully we're a little familiar with the features that are on the main page for creating your design. Another thing I want to mention, this is usually more important when we're inside here in the classroom. Before we're getting ready to download your designs, we do want to make sure we rename this to something more helpful. So because we have a lot of students in class, normally we want you to use your first name. Give us a little detail about what the model is that you're printing, as well as the color. So let's say, for example, I wanted to make my design, or I wanted to have it printed in red. So here is Groot, and he is printed in this silver. If we were sort of comparing that to our design here on the platform or on the print bed, the scribble here, when you're seeing it on the screen, it does look blue. But the ultimate printout will only depend on what you have loaded on the printer. And so if you put in the color on the title of your design, it'll make it easier for us to identify what color it is that you'd want your actual model to be. Most of our printers only have the one nozzle. You are able to purchase more than one nozzle, but the one nozzle means you can only print one color at a time. So in this case, this one is green. You are not able to necessarily dictate that this first, block that Baby Yoda is sitting on top of, you can't really designate green and have the one underneath it be blue. You would have to you'd have to stop the print, unload the current filament, and change the filament. I think we have a question. And then if you'll notice in this one, this is about as complex as you can get. This is an example of having started a print, pausing the print, unloading that filament, loading a different filament, and then continuing the print. But so you can also notice that it's only really levels. You're not able to dictate where exactly, like this part of the block should be this color, this half of the block should be this color. Instead, it's just linear. You're building up, one layer at a time. And so the question about how many colors can you make your designs, here in class with your keychain, we'd ask you to select just the one color. When people drop off prints, or when people were dropping prints off to pick up later, you were also only selecting one color. This is sort of just an experiment on how far we can really go. You could have it maybe rainbow, you could maybe have this several different colors, but again, it would be just sort of in layers. Oh, I hope you guys could still see me. I'm sorry, I forgot that I was sharing my screen. I don't know if you guys noticed, but earlier it had a little funky name to it. If you don't sort of give this your own personal name, Tinkercad does have a funny way of coming up with its own name. So regardless, I do really suggest that when you're working on your projects, you do give them unique names so that you're able to find them easily. And also obviously remember what color it is that you are hoping to have this printed. Okay, and then if we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and get started on walking you through the keychain design that hopefully you have access to. We have one more question. I heard that some people's 3D prints are made out of chocolate. Is that true? So yes, there are, like I said earlier at the beginning of the class, there are a whole range of different printers. There are also some printers that can print out in metal. Obviously, the melting point for that is incredibly high. The machine is very rare, and it only really seems like maybe the government is able to purchase and really play around with something like that. I have seen at, where was this? This must have been like a maker fair in New York a few years back. I have seen some that do print out in chocolate. I don't know a lot about them, but it is possible. It is not something that we have available here though. We do only have the PLA, so the plastic-based filament. Okay, so it looks like we may have already gone through step 1 and 2 of the keychain design instructions. The first thing you want to do obviously is open up Tinkercad and open up a new project. Number 2, change the name of the file. So this was very class specific when we were hoping to print your designs at the end of class. We would really like for you to both attach your name as well as the color that you want it printed on. I'm going to go ahead and select and delete my shape, that scribble that we had been testing with. And instead, we'll go ahead and select the box shape. When you click and drag it onto the build plate, it lands right on the build plate. I do want to mention that there is a difference between these two. So there are 2 different boxes here on the right side of your screen. So the one with the color here is when you're dropping in a solid object onto your build plate. The box that has the stripes on it is for a whole. So there's the complete opposite. In this case, when you have a box on your build plate, what you have here is a solid object. When you're using the box, the whole, if I were to put this here in the center, what you're creating is a hole inside of that object, if that makes any sense. We'll get a little bit more familiar with it with our keychain. So I do want to mention that there are 2 separate designs there. Looks like Sarah put a link to chocolate 3D printers that we can take a look at later on. Later on, I am also hoping to show you how it is that we have these other little figurines printed. But for now, let's just go ahead and get started with the keychain first. So I'm going to go ahead and click undo because I do not want that hole. I do want that box though. So once I've selected my box, I want to adjust the dimensions. So because it is a keychain, I don't have an example of it, but because it is a keychain, it is a relatively small model. We do not want it to be 41 millimeters wide. Actually, we do want it to be 50 wide, 20 millimeters long, but instead only 2 millimeters high. Okay, so I've adjusted the dimensions on the keychain. So that's sort of the base of our keychain. And then in order to get the sort of ring that hoop sort of that the ring goes through, we'll go ahead and click and drag the cylinder onto our build plate. and then set the cylinder height to be 2 millimeters tall. So just the same height as our keychain. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on it and drag it right to the edge of that keychain base. And so here is where we see a little bit more about the holes that I was talking about earlier. We'll go ahead and select the cylinder, drop it right onto our build plate, change the dimensions to be also 2 millimeters high. Ooh, excuse me. About half the diameter of our, nope. Here, sorry about that. So about half the diameter of our original cylinder. I'm gonna go ahead and click and drag it right to the center of our keychain. And to make sure that it is completely centered to that, no, wait, I'm sorry. I'm on step number 9, just for reference on the activity sheet here. So we're right here. No, I'm sorry, we're here, number 9. The next thing we want to do is, put our name on it. So normally we would have you put your name on it. You are also able to put, maybe a nickname or something, but in this case, we want you to experiment with the text feature. So we're going to go ahead and select the text feature and drag that onto our build plate next. To change what it says on here, so right now the default is obviously text. We want to go ahead and double click on it. Or why isn't this open yet? Go ahead. Click on it, and then if it doesn't show up right away, you can drop down the options there on your menu. But we do want to edit this. In my case, I'd go ahead and put my name on it. And you see the changes taking place right away. You are also able to obviously, edit that to be whatever you want. If I wanted to have my full name on there, if I wanted to have my nickname, anything like that. But so once I've gotten the text to show what it is that I'd want on my keychain, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the dimensions again. I normally just click into those dimensions there on the side and adjust them manually. Again, you can also click and drag those corners, but not quite as exact. In this case, I want it to be a little bit thicker than my keychain. I do want the text to be raised. And so instead of making it 2 millimeters tall, I'm going to go ahead and make it 3 millimeters tall. I'm going to hit Control Z. Oh, yeah, to undo. Here's the height, sorry. So 3 millimeters. And then making sure I get a good view of the top. I want to try and center this sort of over on my keychain. Obviously it is too big. So once I've gotten the text to say what I want it to say, I'm going to go ahead and just drag, excuse me, click and drag so that my name fits on the keychain. So I'm looking at it from a top view to make sure that this is sort of centered and it's in the position that I want. But if I look at the front view of this, you'll notice that it's a really thin keychain, but you've got your base keychain, and then my name here or the text that you've put on your keychain design is slightly raised. And so it's a little bit taller than your actual keychain because you do want it to differentiate. You could obviously, experiment with some of the other shapes that are available here. In the past. I kind of went through it really quickly, but in the past I've made keychains where instead of making the whole of my keychain to be circle, I wanted to make it a little bit more unique. And so instead of a hole, I went ahead and selected maybe a star. So I can click the star. Obviously only make it 2 millimeters tall, just like all my other ones. I forgot the measurements. It was 10, I'm sorry. Yeah. And put that right in the center there. There is no option for a star to be sort of a hole, but again, your options are always here on this menu here. I do have that star selected, but instead of a solid, I want to make sure it's a hole so the keychain ring goes straight right through it. So I'll go ahead and select hole. Feel free to do that, but the objective here is just sort of to get your keychain, to be able to go on your key ring. Once we are complete with our keychain design, the last thing we want to do is group these pieces. So unfortunately, if I were to leave my design at this stage, the only thing selected here is the star. And so when I exit out or try to download this file, the only thing that will be saved will be this star. It's the only thing I'm selecting. You can obviously click and drag a box around the entire design, and that way you grab all of the designs together, or all of the different features that you've put together, that you've built up. But the best thing to really do is to go ahead and click and drag a box around it, or use your hotkeys and do Control-A to select all of them. And then you want to use the group feature here at the sort of top right of your menu. The grouping feature will make all of this sort of just one solid object. And so hopefully you can see. You will not see the, the circle that we had put together with the rectangle. Instead, it'll be one solid object. The hole that I was referring to, you can see more clearly now, is in the shape of the star. And then feel free to just sort of take a look around on your diagram, or I'm sorry, on your design, to sort of get used to a 3D view. Do we have a question? How do you change the color? I think you're referring to what we're seeing on the screen, I believe. So right now, all of it turns red. The colors that you're seeing on Tinkercad are really irrelevant. This is sort of just to differentiate between the two. The colors are kind of arbitrary, just sort of like the name that it had originally given it. It was just a little bit of gibberish. The color, again, is really designated by what filament you are loading into the printer. So regardless of what it'll look like on the screen at any time, whether it's here on Tinkercad or one of the slicers, the ones that's giving the printer instructions, regardless of what colors are sort of showing on your screen, the color will depend on the filament that you've loaded onto the machine. I hope that answers your question. With Tinkercad, I don't think you have really the option of sort of changing what these are like. Like the heart will always be brown. When you join or group all of your different features, it probably turns red all of the time. But again, it doesn't really mean anything until you're getting ready to print it. Once you have grouped your object and given it, an appropriate name, we would want you to go ahead and export. I'll go over import in just a little bit, but in this case, we've created a design, you've saved it, and now we want to be able to print it. So what we do is select export. And you do have 3 different file types. These are ones that you could use depending on your slicer, depending on sort of what printer you're using. For this class, we would use OBJ. It's sort of what we prefer for these printers here. So you want to select OBJ. And it will download, hopefully, the files. Here it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I chose the wrong one. I think normally we do an STL. Sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and download the STL file and then just sort of show you what that looks like in the slicer. The slicer is unique to each printer. The printer that we have all the way here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The printer that we have all the way here on my far right, your far left, is the Lulzbot. It's got the biggest print bed. And its corresponding slicing software is called Cura for the Lulzbot. That'll take a minute to load, so we'll just give it some time. So this is normally where we'd end sort of the class. Normally when you're in here, you really just want to sort of tinker with Tinkercad and put together different designs. Because you do not have the ability to sort of give me your designs and have me print them out, I'm just going to show you a few other options or a few other things that you normally would get to see. So people were normally, if you weren't in the class, you could also come by with an STL file saved on a USB drive or accessible online somewhere. And then we would go ahead and sit down with you and open it up on one of our slicing softwares. So I'm trying to give you an idea of what that looks like. Here's sort of the print bed for the Lulzbot there. We'd go ahead and open up your file. In this case, this was the last one that I've been working on. I'll go ahead and open it and it'll open right on the build plate there. So things we wouldn't really worry about in introduction are all of the features that are listed on the far right. Remember saying the speed at which the printer is depositing the material, as well as how fast the nozzle is traveling, or whether it's generating supports or not, would really alter both the time and the amount of filament used. The nice thing with this slicer here is that once you've loaded your object onto the print bed, it gives you an estimate again of how long it'll take. So this tiny little object still takes about 11 minutes to print, and it is about 2 grams worth of filament. And so this is ultimately what it would cost for you to print it here when our services are open. But so that's kind of what it looks like. So you can imagine why it is that something like this, sort of Groot figure takes quite a while. In that case, for more sort of intricate designs, we've been using something called Thingyverse. This link should also be available on the library's website down at the bottom. Additional resources, thingyverse.com. It's really just sort of a database full of designs that people have uploaded for free and that you could download, download and edit for free as well. So for this group here, what we did is search Thingyverse for Groots and select the one that we wanted to print. So I think it's, I believe it's this one. So Thingyverse is great for, just getting started too. You can download all the files directly. The nice thing is that people are very active about experimenting. And so hopefully they give you a little bit more info on sort of what to set your printer's settings at. The comments are really useful for people that are sort of experimenting with your design. They'll make edits, they'll tell you what didn't work very well. You can also just get the individual pieces. So in this case, the Groot does come in 2 pieces. It's not very big, but it is pretty complex. And so this comes in 2 parts. And so you would just download each part, load it onto that slicer, and then save your file and load that into the printer to print.